All right, something that comes up a lot in my graphic design classes is how to make a gradient in Adobe InDesign. Unfortunately, InDesign's color management is not nearly as intuitive as it is in Illustrator and Photoshop. However, InDesign does have a couple of things going for it that are unique to InDesign, mainly the fact that you can apply global colors pretty easily. InDesign is set up to manage global colors through the swatches palette in a much more robust way, I think, than Illustrator and Photoshop. So the first thing you need to do is basically make an object. So let's just get the shape tool and just make a rectangle here in the middle of the artboard. And you'll need the gradient palette open here. You'll also need the swatches palette. If you don't have them open, you can go up to Window, down to Color, and you can turn on gradient and swatches right here. You won't need the actual color palette to do this. You just need gradient and swatches. So with your object drawn and selected here, you can see it's selected because of the handles here. You then basically, to start this process, you just click this gradient thumbnail right here. And it just applies the default gradient. And by default, the gradient palette is holding black and white information, 100% black to 100% white, with this little diamond right here representing the center of the gradation. So you have black, white, and perfectly split in the middle is the center of the gradation there. And from here, you can manipulate it. You can do several different things. By default, it's set to linear. You could change it to radial, which radiates from the center. Let's just do linear for this example here. You can reverse it by clicking this button. It changes the side. You can also do that manually by moving these things. These are basically just sliders that you can drag. So this is something that you can manipulate manually like I'm doing now, or you can hit this button to do it. You can also change the angle. If you want to make it up and down, you can type in 90, hit enter, and there it is. It's vertical. You can reverse it. So then another thing worth noting here is that this location field right here, where you see this readout, this number readout represents the spot on this gradient slider, the exact spot where these handles are being positioned. So you can see I'm changing the location of the black point here and changing the location of the white point here. So you could get very precise with this if you wanted. And by default, this diamond, the center, is in the 50% spot. But you could throttle this one direction or another if you wanted, manually or by typing the number in right there. Okay, so the tricky part though is adding new colors into the gradient palette. This is surprisingly not intuitive, or unintuitive, I should say. You would think that you could just double click this and get access to like a color picker kind of thing, but you don't. That's not how this works. This is more like a control panel. This is not really like a selection panel. You have to sort of load colors into it manually like this. So you basically drag them and drop them from the swatches palette. So I'm going to drag magenta here up into the black spot. So that black point there, that little container, it's sort of like a vessel that's holding the color itself. And you can kind of fill it from the swatches palette. So let's move green over to the white here. There we have a gradient here. And now the thing that's worth noting is that the gradient now is attached to the swatches down here. So if I deselect this object, the object's not selected right now. However, you can manipulate the color inside the object because it's attached to the swatch. And what I mean by that is magenta that I just loaded into this spot right here, I can manipulate it right here by double clicking it in the swatches palette and starting to change the values here. So if I no longer wanted it to be that pink color, that magenta color, if I wanted to make this gradient a little more like a cool tone, like a green tone down to a cool tone, you can change the color mixture of the magenta color swatch. And here, if I toggle preview on and off, you can see it's changing it. And the interesting thing about that is you could potentially do that across an entire document. So let me just show you how that works. Okay, so that's probably a little bit of overkill there, but I've just made about 100 objects here on my artboard. They're all set to like a 30% gray right now, but what I want to do is select all. So Command A on the keyboard or Control A if you're on Windows machine. So they're all selected now. I'm going to now click the gradient, this gradient thumbnail over here in the gradient palette, and it applies that gradient to all of these. I'm going to deselect, so Command Shift A to deselect all from the keyboard. And these all are being filled with a combination of this swatch, this green swatch, and this blue swatch right here. Now, this is this shows the global power of Adobe InDesign. And imagine these elements scattered across, say, like a 200-page book. This is pretty nice. So you can now open up the swatch palette and start to change the values if you want to manipulate these. And it's going to do it across all the objects because they're all linking back to the same swatch. Click OK to commit the change. And there you go. That's an overview of how to use the gradient tool in Adobe InDesign.